is your Classic Metal Show right here on the ClassicMetalShow.com. That's brand new stuff from the mighty band Styx. That one is called Radio Silence. That's from the album The Mission. So I guess it's not brand new, but it's still fairly new. And a guy that I guess is still fairly new to some people in the band Styx, but is actually getting ready to past the 2-decade mark in the band. It is the vocalist, and in my opinion, as someone that's seen him live, the leader on stage of the band. It is Lawrence Gowan. Lawrence, how are you, man?
It couldn't be better. How are you, Chris?
Excellent. Gotta say, great record to start off, man. The Mission is a very, very strong record. One of the strongest, in the Styx catalog in a very, very long time, man. So congratulations right off the bat with that.
Well, music to our ears to hear you say that. I think the most worthwhile thing that I've heard a year, since the album came out is just the number of, I'll call them the Styx faithful, who have an ongoing debate as to where the Mission sits in the top 5 Styx albums of all time. So we really feel like it was a worthy to make this record. I'm glad that it's been so well received.
Sure. Now. Gowan, obviously the Styx machine, it rolls on and on and on. You guys are one of the most amazingly active bands that is out there at this time in rock history, which is kind of an odd time where rock music is a little bit out of fashion. Talk about what it is that you've seen being out on the road with the bands, as long as you have, that keeps bringing people back and isn't finding people gravitating away from that classic rock sound. People are still hungry for it.
Great question, because it's something that we kind of scratch our heads about, occasionally ourselves. I think the best answer I've got to that at this point is that, rock music was the gigantic musical statement of the last half of the 20th century. So for something to have lasted and had an impact like that on people's ears and their senses for over 50 years, it moves from the category of being a disposable pop music into something that really was a legitimately I guess not to sound too lofty with it, but it has artistic merit. Let's just call it that. In that there are still people that are gravitating toward it, as you said, and there are younger people who, I don't know, may feel disenchanted or disenfranchised or somewhat not connected to a lot of the newer things that have come out, and because of the internet, they've been able to kind of scope out, bands with legendary names like Styx or Led Zeppelin or Queen or Genesis, and they find something in that classic rock sound that still resonates with their lives today. And once they come and see a show, it's almost like we've got them. It becomes part of their concurrent with their life on the planet, and they don't seem to suffer from any sort of latent ageism or something like that. They just hear it, they love it, and they feel the energy of what a great rock concert can do to them. And I think they remain enamored with it from that point forward.
Sure, and one of the things, especially from seeing you guys specifically live, is for a band that has a lot of years. Obviously, you guys are still doing a show. It's not a bunch of guys on stage standing around playing their hits. I mean, you especially. I mean, you're spinning around in circles, and you're jumping on top of the keyboard and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, it really is it's a great show, as well as musically excellent.
Well, fantastic. Write that down immediately. That's exactly what we want to hear. That's exactly what we want we want people to react. We want them to feel that, it's exciting for us to do this. It's not, even though we do it so often, and as you say, we tour. I don't know another band that tours at a higher level than we do. We play less than over 100 shows a year, and we're aware of the insatiable demand to see the band, around the world, and so we try to meet as much of that demand. But there's something that happens. I guess it's just our DNA or how we have lived our lives on the planet. There's something that happens, however you want to describe it, kinetically or cosmically or however you want to say it, where the moment we get in front of that audience, and no matter how many times it is, it's a fresh opportunity to make this experience happen for them and for us. And remember, we're seeing a show as well. We're seeing thousands of people with big smiles on their face at the end of the night, and that is very, it's very invigorating. It's very inspiring to keep doing this, because it's fun to begin with, but it's way more fun when there's, a good pile of, affectionate people out there that are really showing you that they're giving it their the highest stamp of approval,
sure,
so to speak.
No doubt, man. Well, Gowan, let's talk a little bit about the mission. As anybody that looks at the internet even a little bit could find out in about a second, it's the highest charting record Styx has had all the way back to like Kilroy was here. It actually
Mm-hmm.
did chart, and it is a very, very strong record. Do you attribute that to the strength of the music itself, or the fact that fans are just hungry for classic rock, or maybe a little bit of both, or maybe a lot of both?
We made a kind of a pact, Chris, when we started this album. We said, if we get to the end of this, and if we don't love it ourselves, if we can't look each other in the eye and say, I really love it, let's not put it out, because we don't have to. There's plenty of Styx material. We can keep on playing, as long as the demand stays at the level that it is, and it doesn't show any signs of slowing down. But as we were making the record, I think a lot of things that were kind of circling the band, or surrounding collective aura, if you want to term it like that, I think they started to really firing, and I think the songwriting. I would bring that to the fore. First of all, I'd say having a producer who was able to focus on the record when we would come in for, a week or so and focus, really intensely on it. We'd go away for a month or two sometimes, or three, just to play all these shows. But he could continue, hammering away and figuring out exactly what he had to get out of the band the next time we had a break. And so we kept our eye on the ball and never really drifted away from the original intention, which was, let's make a record that sounds as close to 1979 as we can. And in order to do that, let's use old technology. Let's record to tape. Let's write it. Let's make sure we're all in the room at the same time. Nobody's going to fly any parts in from their laptop or something like that. There's going to be no use of digital technology whatsoever.
Right.
So with that combined effort, that was an exciting little adventure to go on. The record eventually got to the point where we looked around the room. We've all got big smiles on our faces. We're like, well, I can't wait for people to hear this.
Right.
And that's why we're pretty. There's an extra pep in our step, so
sure,
because of that in this year.
No doubt. Now, I'm, and this is strictly as a fan, because I am no musician at all, but as a fan, I've always assumed that a concept record has to be incredibly difficult as a band to put together, because one, you have to tell the story and you have to tell it well, but at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be able to pull out tracks that will stand by themselves independently for the less hardcore fans in order for it to be a successful record. When you guys were working on this, was that a consideration in like the writing process, or does it just develop that way and you just realize, well, this track would fit in either or scenario?
It was a consideration, but much as you've described it, it's a balancing act. We would get toward the end of writing one song, or for example, and say, okay, where does this fit in the story? Sometimes we're down to the last 3 or 4 lines, and we're thinking, where exactly does this fit? And then that would rise. We would discuss that a little bit, and then realize, oh, well, if we change this line to saying this, and if we change this little bridge here to where this character in this song has to exemplify this point of view, or it has to kind of voice this point of view. If we change those two things, then the story is still somewhat intact. And the word "somewhat" is actually important. If you try to make it too literal, you lose the joy of rock, where people can just personalize the song and make it mean something themselves. If you make it not literal enough, then you've taken people off the rails as far as following any sort of linear story if they so choose to do so. So it is a balancing act. I think to this day, the greatest concept record is still Sgt. Pepper, because even though the Beatles, all claimed that it was not a concept record, to the audiences out there, and to fans, there's a concept there, and nobody can quite put their finger on what exactly it is.
Right.
But it follows this kind of, there's a spirit that kind of carries through from the beginning to end. You can take the songs individually, as you pointed out, and they still sound great. But when you hear them as a collective, they take you to this other realm entirely, where Pepperland, or whatever you want to call it,
right,
where this story unfolds in your mind. And so there's a lot of it is theater of the mind. It would be the expression that I think is most akin to. And again, this is very tied to the art form of the album. The album that has two sides, and you flip over from side A to side B, and the journey continues. So really, it's keeping all those plates spinning, so to speak, that you have to do when you're making a concept record. And in some ways, funny enough, it's easier because everybody has to keep their eye on the ball and they can't spin too far off the rails. And in some ways, it's harder because you have kind of decided that you're going to go down this particular road, and you're going to see it through until its logical conclusion.
Right, definitely. Now, Gowan, I guess I can say it now. I'm getting to be an old guy. I mean, I'm 49. I'll be 50 this year coming. So you're
a kid.
I'm not a kid. I wish I still was. Don't you wish we all still were? But as somebody that is in that age group, which is I'm going to assume the sweet spot for Styx fans, I've seen the band in pretty much every iteration of the band. I'm a big fan of the band. The longest ago I saw Styx was 83, 4, whatever Caught in the Act tour was.
Right.
And I saw you guys as recently as I think it was last year at the Roxino here in Ohio.
Great.
And in between, I've seen Styx several times. I've seen Dennis DeYoung doing the music of Styx several times.
Right.
As a fan, it really turns out to be like three different entities. There's the original lineup, I guess, and then there's your lineup, and then there's the Dennis doing his thing lineup.
Yeah.
And what and it leads me to a question for you, and I don't want to tread on Dennis DeYoung versus you type thing. That's not what I want to do. But what I'm curious of is, I have to assume for you to step into shoes of a very well-regarded, well-known artist. At first, you probably had some thought that you had to sort of mimic what he did, where now it's very clear that you don't. Now you have really put your stamp even on the classic songs to where they sound like they did in the classic era, but they're clearly you live. And so I guess my question is, did you at the beginning feel like you had to mimic? And if so, what was it that made you get comfortable enough to where you were able to stretch out to doing it your own way?
Great question. So there are several parts to that I'd like to address. The first one is, I love that you've seen all incarnations of the band. That's kind of important for someone that has a perspective on the arc, so to speak, of its life. I look at the band that's on stage. That we take the stage tonight here in Oklahoma. We are
right.
We are the culmination of the efforts of everyone that's ever been in Styx. So I feel like I'm part of this very exclusive club of people. There's only ever been 10 members of the band. For a band that's closing in on 50 years existence, that's a rather incredibly low number.
Sure.
Because look at some other bands. You're up to 30, you're up to 40 members,
right.
For a band that's been around this long. So we are the culmination of the efforts of everyone. So I'm going to say, John Panazzo, John Serlewski, Dennis DeYoung, Glenn Burtnick, all those four people are they in their eras serve and to a great degree, and we'll never quite know just who, how much one have influenced the other, and how relationship into the interpersonal relationship of the musicians affected the outcome. So when I came into the band, they felt they needed new blood. They felt it's almost like, I look at it like you adopting a new kid, and you kind of want to much about that family that was great as you can, but at the same time you want to and see if you can find a new dynamic, so to speak. So yes, initially when I came in myself from a personal standpoint, a little bit probably like, and I'm going to just completely guess here because I don't know for sure, but I feel like when Phil Collins stepped up in front of the mic with Genesis to sing the Gabriel era stuff from Genesis, I can hear a lot in Phil's voice where it sounds like he's doing his Gabriel best.
Right.
In some ways, it's not so much an impression, but he's trying to attack all the great little nuances that Gabriel had in there. Roll the clock ahead just a couple of years after he's the Trick of the Tail, after the album without Peter Gabriel in the band, which to me was incredible. Suddenly his voice begins to take on a nuance of and a command where I listen to him sing Supper's Ready, and then I listen to the Gabriel version of Supper's Ready, and I can't choose which one I like best. I love them both.
Right.
And I feel they both kind of give me they're from a different perspective on what the lyrics can mean. And the more different Phil Collins began to become over the years, the better I liked it. And the more, and then, of course, Gabriel blossomed into what Gabriel became, which is, and he couldn't have done that had he remained in Genesis. So I see it as, I think I just needed to kind of get a few years of, particularly of Tommy and JY and Chuck saying to me, look, don't feel like you have to in any way, make it sound like the old records. You really have to just keep being yourself and find the sincerity and the connection to the song that you feel authentically and do that. And so often they'd hear me doing the songs in rehearsal, and they'd go, yeah, more like that. And so I would gravitate toward that more and more, and to now where I'm at the point where those are old conversations, and I feel, although I was not part of the writing, obviously, of Come Sail Away, and it was a song that existed long before my, crack at singing it. It's funny, when I hear myself sing it, I get a nuance of meaning from it than when I hear the original recording. I hear the original recording sounds to me like a young man who's very hopeful and destined for greatness and feels that he just is about to go on this voyage. And when I hear myself sing it, I hear it sounds more of a sound almost like an Irish, not lament, but an Irish kind of take on things where it's bittersweet. You've had a lot of the journey behind you, and you're reflecting on how there is no other course now to follow but to keep on pushing ahead rather than looking, because there's nothing you can change about the past. So that might be me over interpreting, but I mentioned that to Tommy when, a few years ago, and he said that he had to agree, and that's exactly how I hear it. It sounds like someone who's been on a long voyage but is continuing on. And when he hears the original recording come on the radio, he goes, that sounds like young men who, are embarking on it. And both are viable. Both kind of can take people to a certain place, and luckily that seems to be what's working. At least that's the best way I can distill any sort of answer to that. Sure.
Well, it definitely works. Now I got to tell you, Gowan, and this is just me, and maybe you agree with this, maybe you don't, but outside of doing this, I write some books. I've written 4 books so far. I write about various things.
Oh,
and when I write a book about a topic, I then cannot read anybody else's book on the same topic because I can't relate to it any longer. So
right.
I have to from seeing you perform the classic 1978, 77, 82 songs from Styx, you seem like you are completely connected and have a complete passion for those songs. And I, for the life of me, can't figure out how you do it, because it's just, I know for me, I have total passion for anything that I personally write. And I don't think I could be that passionate for something that I did not, influence. Does that make sense?
I understand. Yeah, it does make sense. And I can relate to that because when I go and play, I just, 2 weeks ago, I just finished doing 7 solo shows. I still play gallant shows in Canada. And, when I'm doing that material from that era of my life, for people here that don't know, I had several multi-platinum records in Canada, and also gold records and a gold single, and that's all part of the background that not that many people in the U.S. need to know because my records never come out here. But as some perspective on what you're saying, that's true for me too. I feel like that's part of my whole life is when I'm singing those songs. They feel like they're connected to my entire life, whereas Styx is 1/3 of my life. It's the last 20 years, just about. Right. And I feel, in a way, I have such joy doing that now as well. Even though I didn't write, I wasn't, part of the writing and performing team back in those days. But I feel like we've had such a great adventure together. I'm connected to that. I'm connected to the accomplishments that we've had in the collective in our era of the band, and that's really why. That's a big part of why I enjoy doing those songs so much. Sure,
definitely. Well, one record I could guarantee you enjoy doing is anything off of the Mission. It is the brand new record from Styx.
Oh yeah.
And I'll tell you what, Gowan. As a tradition on the show, we always let the artist pick a closing track from the new record and maybe tell us a story about it to wrap it up. So, what would you like us to wrap this one up with?
Sure. How about we'll go with one of the final songs on the album is called "The Outpost," and I think it's a great rockin' piece that kind of sums up a lot of the record. It's towards the end of the story. They've arrived at this. They've gone farther than they ever thought they would have. And so you can draw all kinds of metaphors between that and the existence of Styx to this day.
Right.
So I would go with that song from the Mission. It's called "The Outpost."
All right. Well, let's check it out right now. This is Styx right here on your Classic Metal Show.